Chapter 15. A Photograph. The doctor's words were so surprising that we were all momentarily taken aback. Here was a man stabbed with a dagger, which we knew to have been stolen only 24 hours previously, and yet Dr. Durand asserted positively that he'd been dead at least 48 hours. The whole thing was fantastic to the last extreme. We were still recovering from the surprise of the doctor's announcement when a telegram was brought to me. It had been sent up from the hotel to the villa. I tore it open. It was from Poirot, and announced his return by the train arriving at Merlinville at 12:28. I looked at my watch and saw that I had just time to get comfortably to the station and meet him there. I felt that it was of the utmost importance that he should know at once of the new and startling developments in the case. Evidently, I reflected, Poirot had had no difficulty in finding what he wanted in Paris. The quickness of his return proved that. Very few hours had sufficed. I wondered how he would take the exciting news I had to impart. The train was some minutes late, and I strolled aimlessly up and down the platform until it occurred to me that I might pass the time by asking a few questions as to who had left Merlinville by the last train on the evening of the tragedy. I approached the chief porter, an intelligent-looking man, and had little difficulty in persuading him to enter upon the subject. It was a disgrace to the police, he hotly affirmed, that such brigands or assassins should be allowed to go about unpunished. I hinted that there was some possibility they might have left by the midnight train, but he negatived the idea decidedly. He would have noticed 2 foreigners, he was sure of it. Only about 20 people had left by the train, and he could not have failed to observe them. I do not know what put the idea into my head. Possibly it was the deep anxiety underlying Marthe Daubreuil's tones, but I asked suddenly, "Young Monsieur Renauld, he did not leave by that train, did he?" "Ah, no, monsieur. To arrive and start off again within half an hour, it would not be amusing, that." I stared at the man, the significance of his words almost escaping me. Then I saw. "You mean," I said, my heart beating a little, "that Monsieur Jacques Renauld arrived at Merlinville that evening?" "But yes, monsieur, by the last train arriving the other way, the 11:40. My brain whirled. That, then, was the reason of Marthe's poignant anxiety. Jacques Renauld had been in Merlinville on the night of the crime. But why had he not said so? Why, on the contrary, had he led us to believe that he had remained in Cherbourg? Remembering his frank, boyish countenance, I could hardly bring myself to believe that he had any connection with the crime. Yet why this silence on his part about so vital a matter? One thing was certain. Marthe had known all along. Hence her anxiety, and her eager questioning of Poirot as to whether anyone was suspected. My cogitations were interrupted by the arrival of the train, and in another moment I was greeting Poirot. The little man was radiant. He beamed and vociferated, and forgetting my English reluctance, embraced me warmly on the platform. "Mon cher ami, I have succeeded, but succeeded to a marvel. Indeed, I'm delighted to hear it. Have you heard the latest here? How would you that I should hear anything? There have been developments, sir? The brave Giraud, he has made an arrest, or even arrests, perhaps? Ah, but I will make him look foolish, that one. But where are you taking me, my friend? Do we not go to the hotel? It is necessary that I tend to my moustaches. They are deplorably limp from the heat of travelling. Also, without doubt, there is dust on my coat, and my tie, that I must rearrange." I cut short his remonstrances. "My dear Poirot, never mind all that. We must go to the villa at once. There has been another murder." Never have I seen a man so flabbergasted. His jaw dropped. All the jauntiness went out of his bearing. He stared at me open-mouthed. "What is that you say? Another murder? Ah, then, but I am all wrong. I have failed. Giraud may mock himself at me. He will have reason." "You did not expect it, then?" "I? Not the least in the world. It demolishes my theory. It ruins everything. No." He stopped dead, thumping himself on the chest. "It is impossible. I cannot be wrong. The facts, taken methodically and in their proper order, admit of only one explanation. I must be right. I am right. But then," he interrupted me, "wait, my friend. I must be right. Therefore this new murder is impossible, unless... Oh, wait, I implore you. Say no word." He was silent for a moment or two. Then, resuming his normal manner, he said in a quiet, assured voice, "The victim is a man of middle age. His body was found in the locked shed near the scene of the crime and had been dead at least 48 hours, and it is most probable that he was stabbed in a similar manner to Monsieur Renauld, though not necessarily in the back." It was my turn to gape, and gape I did. In all my knowledge of Poirot, he had never done anything so amazing as this, and almost inevitably a doubt crossed my mind. "Poirot," I cried, "you're pulling my leg. You've heard all about it already." He turned his earnest gaze upon me reproachfully. "Would I do such a thing? I assure you that I have heard nothing whatsoever. Did you not observe the shock your news was to me? But how on earth could you know all that?" I was right then, but I knew it. The little grey cells, my friend, the little grey cells. They told me. Thus, and in no other way, could there have been a second death. Now, tell me all. If we go round to the left here, we can take a shortcut across the golf links, which will bring us to the back of the Villa Geneviève much more quickly. As we walked, taking the way he had indicated, I recounted all I knew. Poirot listened attentively. "The dagger was in the wound, you say? That is curious. You are sure it was the same one?" "Absolutely certain. That's what makes it so impossible." "Nothing is impossible. There may have been 2 daggers." I raised my eyebrows. "Surely that is in the highest degree unlikely. It would be a most extraordinary coincidence." "You speak as usual without reflection, Hastings. In some cases, 2 identical weapons would be highly improbable, but not here. This particular weapon was a war souvenir, which was made to Jack Renaud's orders. It is really highly unlikely, when you come to think of it, that he should have had only one made. Very probably he would have another for his own use." "But nobody's mentioned such a thing," I objected. A hint of the lecturer crept into Poirot's tone. "My friend, in working upon a case, one does not take into account only the things that are mentioned. There is no reason to mention many things which may be important. Equally, there is often an excellent reason for not mentioning them. You can take your choice of the 2 motives." I was silent, impressed in spite of myself. Another few minutes brought us to the famous shed. We found all our friends there, and after an interchange of polite amenities, Poirot began his task. Having watched Giraud at work, I was keenly interested. Poirot bestowed but a cursory glance on the surroundings. The only thing he examined was the ragged coat and trousers by the door. A disdainful smile rose to Giraud's lips, and as though noting it, Poirot flung the bundle down again. "Old clothes of the gardeners?" he queried. "Exactly," said Giraud. Poirot knelt down by the body. His fingers were rapid but methodical. He examined the texture of the clothes, and satisfied himself that there were no marks on them. The boots he subjected to special care, also the dirty and broken fingernails. While examining the latter, he threw a quick question at Giraud. "You saw them?" "Yes, I saw them," replied the other. His face remained inscrutable. Suddenly, Poirot stiffened. "Dr. Durand." "Yes?" The doctor came forward. "There is foam on the lips. You observed it?" "I didn't notice it, I must admit." "But you observe it now?" "Oh, certainly." Poirot again shot a question at Giraud. "You noticed it without doubt?" The other did not reply. Poirot proceeded. The dagger had been withdrawn from the wound. It reposed in a glass jar by the side of the body. Poirot examined it. Then he studied the wound closely. When he looked up, his eyes were excited and shone with the green light I knew so well. "It is a strange wound, this. It has not bled. There is no stain on the clothes. The blade of the dagger is slightly discoloured, that is all. What do you think, Monsieur le Docteur?" "I can only say that it is most abnormal." "It is not abnormal at all. It is most simple. The man was stabbed after he was dead." And stilling the clamour of voices that arose with a wave of his hand, Poirot turned to Giraud and added, "Monsieur Giraud agrees with me, do you not, monsieur?" Whatever Giraud's real belief, he accepted the position without moving a muscle. Calmly, and almost scornfully, he replied, "Certainly, I agree." The murmur of surprise and interest broke out again. "But what an idea!" cried Monsieur Hautet. "To stab a man after he is dead? Barbaric! Unheard of! Some unappeasable hate, perhaps?" "No," said Poirot. "I should fancy it was done quite cold-bloodedly to create an impression." "What impression?" "The impression it nearly did create," returned Poirot oracularly. Monsieur Bex had been thinking. "How, then, was the man killed?" "He was not killed. He died. He died, if I am not much mistaken, of an epileptic fit." This statement of Poirot's again caused considerable excitement. Dr. Durand knelt down again and made a searching examination. At last he rose to his feet. "Monsieur Poirot, I am inclined to believe that you are correct in your assertion. I was misled to begin with. The incontrovertible fact that the man had been stabbed distracted my attention from any other indications. Poirot was the hero of the hour. The examining magistrate was profuse in compliments. Poirot responded gracefully, and then excused himself on the pretext that neither he nor I had yet lunched, and that he wished to repair the ravages of the journey. As we were about to leave the shed, Giraud approached us. "One other thing, Monsieur Poirot," he said in his suave, mocking voice. "We found this, coiled round the handle of the dagger. A woman's hair." "Ah," said Poirot. "A woman's hair? What woman's, I wonder?" "I wonder also," said Giraud. Then, with a bow, he left us. "He was insistent, the good Giraud," said Poirot thoughtfully as we walked towards the hotel. "I wonder in what direction he hopes to mislead me. A woman's hair? We lunched heartily, but I found Poirot somewhat distrait and inattentive. Afterwards, we went up to our sitting-room, and there I begged him to tell me something of his mysterious journey to Paris. "Willingly, my friend. I went to Paris to find this." He took from his pocket a small, faded newspaper cutting. It was the reproduction of a woman's photograph. He handed it to me. I uttered an exclamation. "You recognize it, my friend?" I nodded. Although the photo obviously dated from many, many years back, and the hair was dressed in a different style, the likeness was unmistakable. "Madame Daubreuil!" I exclaimed. Poirot shook his head with a smile. "Not quite correct, my friend. She did not call herself by that name in those days. That is a picture of the notorious Madame Beroldy." Madame Beroldy! In a flash, the whole thing came back to me. The murder trial that had evoked such worldwide interest, the Beroldy Case. Chapter 16. The Beroldy Case. Some 20 years or so before the opening of the present story, Monsieur Arnold Beroldy, a native of Lyon, arrived in Paris accompanied by his pretty wife and their little daughter, a mere babe. Monsieur Beroldy was a junior partner in a firm of wine merchants, a stout, middle-aged man, fond of the good things of life, devoted to his charming wife, and altogether unremarkable in every way. The firm, in which Monsieur Beroldy was a partner, was a small one, and although doing well, it did not yield a large income to the junior partner. The Beroldys had a small apartment, and lived in a very modest fashion, to begin with. But unremarkable though Monsieur Beroldy might be, his wife was plentifully gilded with the brush of romance. Young and good-looking, and gifted withal with a singular charm of manner, Madame Beroldy at once created a stir in the quarter, especially when it began to be whispered that some interesting mystery surrounded her birth. It was rumoured that she was the illegitimate daughter of a Russian Grand Duke. Others asserted that it was an Austrian Archduke, and that the union was legal, though morganatic. But all stories agreed upon one point, that Jeanne Beroldy was the centre of an interesting mystery. Among the friends and acquaintances of the Beroldys was a young lawyer, Georges Conneau. It was soon evident that the fascinating Jeanne had completely enslaved his heart. Madame Beroldy encouraged the young man in a discreet fashion, but always being careful to affirm her complete devotion to her middle-aged husband. Nevertheless, many spiteful persons did not hesitate to declare that young Conneau was her lover, and not the only one. When the Beroldys had been in Paris about 3 months, another personage came upon the scene. This was Mr. Hiram P. Trapp, a native of the United States, and extremely wealthy. Introduced to the charming and mysterious Madame Beroldy, he fell a prompt victim to her fascinations. His admiration was obvious, though strictly respectful. About this time, Madame Beroldy became more outspoken in her confidences. To several friends she declared herself greatly worried on her husband's behalf. She explained that he had been drawn into several schemes of a political nature, and also referred to some important papers that had been entrusted to him for safekeeping, and which concerned a secret of far-reaching European importance. They had been entrusted to his custody to throw pursuers off the track, but Madame Beroldy was nervous, having recognized several important members of the revolutionary circle in Paris. On the 28th day of November, the blow fell. The woman, who came daily to clean and cook for the Beroldys, was surprised to find the door of the apartment standing wide open. Hearing faint moans issuing from the bedroom, she went in. A terrible sight met her eyes. Madame Beroldy lay on the floor, bound hand and foot, uttering feeble moans, having managed to free her mouth from a gag. On the bed was Monsieur Beroldy, lying in a pool of blood, with a knife driven through his heart. Madame Beroldy's story was clear enough. Suddenly awakened from sleep, she had discerned 2 masked men bending over her. Stifling her cries, they had bound and gagged her. They had then demanded of Monsieur Beroldy the famous secret. But the intrepid wine merchant refused point-blank to accede to their request. Angered by his refusal, one of the men incontinently stabbed him through the heart. With the dead man's keys, they had opened the safe in the corner, and had carried away with them a mass of papers. Both men were heavily bearded, and had worn masks, but Madame Beroldy declared positively that they were Russians. The affair created an immense sensation. Time went on, and the mysterious bearded men were never traced, and then, just as public interest was beginning to die down, a startling development occurred. Madame Beroldy was arrested and charged with the murder of her husband. The trial, when it came on, aroused widespread interest. The youth and beauty of the accused and her mysterious history were sufficient to make of it a cause célèbre. It was proved beyond doubt that Jeanne Beroldy's parents were a highly respectable and prosaic couple, fruit merchants who lived on the outskirts of Lyon. The Russian Grand Duke, the court intrigues, and the political schemes, all the stories current, were traced back to the lady herself. Remorselessly, the whole story of her life was laid bare. The motive for the murder was found in Mr. Hiram P. Trapp. Mr. Trapp did his best, but relentlessly and agilely cross-questioned, he was forced to admit that he loved the lady, and that, had she been free, he would have asked her to be his wife. The fact that the relations between them were admittedly platonic strengthened the case against the accused. Debarred from becoming his mistress by the simple, honourable nature of the man, Jeanne Beroldy had conceived the monstrous project of ridding herself of her elderly, undistinguished husband and becoming the wife of the rich American. Throughout, Madame Beroldy confronted her accusers with complete sang-froid and self-possession. Her story never varied. She continued to declare strenuously that she was of royal birth and that she had been substituted for the daughter of the fruit seller at an early age. Absurd and completely unsubstantiated as these statements were, a great number of people believed implicitly in their truth. But the prosecution was implacable. It denounced the masked Russians as a myth and asserted that the crime had been committed by Madame Beroldy and her lover, Georges Conneau. A warrant was issued for the arrest of the latter, but he had wisely disappeared. Evidence showed that the bonds which had secured Madame Beroldy were so loose that she could easily have freed herself. And then, towards the close of the trial, a letter, posted in Paris, was sent to the public prosecutor. It was from Georges Conneau, and without revealing his whereabouts, it contained a full confession of the crime. He declared that he had indeed struck the fatal blow at Madame Beroldy's instigation. The crime had been planned between them. Believing that her husband ill-treated her, and maddened by his own passion for her, a passion which he believed her to return, he had planned the crime and struck the fatal blow that should free the woman he loved from a hateful bondage. Now, for the first time, he learnt of Mr. Hiram P. Trapp and realized that the woman he loved had betrayed him. Not for his sake did she wish to be free, but in order to marry the wealthy American. She had used him as a cat's paw, and now, in his jealous rage, he turned and denounced her, declaring that throughout he had acted at her instigation. And then Madame Beroldy proved herself the remarkable woman she undoubtedly was. Without hesitation, she dropped her previous defence and admitted that the Russians were a pure invention on her part. The real murderer was Georges Conneau. Maddened by passion, he had committed the crime, vowing that if she did not keep silence he would exact a terrible vengeance from her. Terrified by his threats, she had consented, also fearing it likely that if she told the truth she might be accused of conniving at the crime, but she had steadfastly refused to have anything more to do with her husband's murderer, and it was in revenge for this attitude on her part that he had written this letter accusing her. She swore solemnly that she had had nothing to do with the planning of the crime, that she had awoke on that memorable night to find Georges Conneau standing over her, the blood-stained knife in his hand. It was a touch-and-go affair. Madame Beroldy's story was hardly credible, but her address to the jury was a masterpiece. The tears streaming down her face, she spoke of her child, of her woman's honour, of her desire to keep her reputation untarnished for the child's sake. She admitted that Georges Conneau, having been her lover, she might perhaps be held morally responsible for the crime, but before God, nothing more. She knew that she had committed a grave fault in not denouncing Conneau to the law, but she declared in a broken voice that that was a thing no woman could have done. She had loved him. Could she let her hand be the one to send him to the guillotine? She had been guilty of much, but she was innocent of the terrible crime imputed to her. However that may have been, her eloquence and personality won the day. Madame Beroldy, amidst a scene of unparalleled excitement, was acquitted. Despite the utmost endeavours of the police, Georges Conneau was never traced. As for Madame Beroldy, nothing more was heard of her. Taking the child with her, she left Paris to begin a new life. Chapter 17. We make further investigations. I have set down the Beroldy case in full. Of course, all the details did not present themselves to my memory as I have recounted them here. Nevertheless, I recall the case fairly accurately. It had attracted a great deal of interest at the time, and had been fully reported by the English papers, so that it did not need much effort of memory on my part to recollect the salient details. Just for the moment, in my excitement, it seemed to clear up the whole matter. I admit that I am impulsive, and Poirot deplores my custom of jumping to conclusions, but I think I had some excuse in this instance. The remarkable way in which this discovery justified Poirot's point of view struck me at once. "Poirot," I said, "I congratulate you. I see everything now." Poirot lit one of his little cigarettes with his usual precision. Then he looked up. "And since you see everything now, mon ami, what exactly is it that you see?" "Why, that it was Madame Daubreuil, Beroldy, who murdered Mr. Renauld. The similarity of the two cases proves that beyond a doubt." "Then you consider that Madame Beroldy was wrongly acquitted? That in actual fact she was guilty of connivance at her husband's murder?" I opened my eyes wide. "Well, of course. Don't you?" Poirot walked to the end of the room, absent-mindedly straightening a chair, and then said thoughtfully, "Yes, that is my opinion. But there is no 'of course' about it, my friend. Technically speaking, Madame Beroldy is innocent." "Well, of that crime, perhaps, but not of this." Poirot sat down again and regarded me, his thoughtful air more marked than ever. "So, it is definitely your opinion, Hastings, that Madame Daubreuil murdered Monsieur Renauld?" "Yes." "Why?" He shot the question at me with such suddenness that I was taken aback. "Why?" I stammered. "Why? Because, I came to a stop. Poirot nodded his head at me. "You see, you come to a stumbling block at once. Why should Madame Daubreuil, I shall call her that for clearness' sake, murder Monsieur Renauld? We can find no shadow of a motive. She does not benefit by his death. Considered as either mistress or blackmailer, she stands to lose. You cannot have a murder without motive. The first crime was different. There we had a rich lover, waiting to step into her husband's shoes. Money is not the only motive for murder," I objected. "True," agreed Poirot placidly. "There are two others. The crime passionnel is one. And there is the third rare motive, murder for an idea, which implies some form of mental derangement on the part of the murderer. Homicidal mania and religious fanaticism belong to that class. We can rule it out here." "But what about crime passionnel? Can you rule that out? If Madame Daubreuil was Renaud's mistress, if she found that his affection was cooling, or if her jealousy was aroused in any way, might she not have struck him down in a moment of anger?" Poirot shook his head. "If, I say if, you note. Madame Daubreuil was Renaud's mistress. He had not had time to tire of her, and in any case you mistake her character. She is a woman who can simulate great emotional stress. She is a magnificent actress, but looked at dispassionately, her life disproves her appearance. Throughout, if we examine it, she has been cold-blooded and calculating in her motives and actions. It was not to link her life with that of her young lover that she connived at her husband's murder. The rich American, for whom she probably did not care a button, was her objective. If she committed a crime, she would always do it for gain. Here, there was no gain. Besides, how do you account for the digging of the grave? That was man's work." "She might have had an accomplice," I suggested, unwilling to relinquish my belief. I passed to another objection. "You have spoken of the similarity between the two crimes. Wherein does that lie, my friend?" I stared at him in astonishment. "Why, Poirot, it was you who remarked on that. The story of the masked men. The secret, the papers." Poirot smiled a little. "Do not be so indignant, I beg of you. I repudiate nothing. The similarity of the two stories links the two cases together inevitably. But reflect now on something very curious. It is not Madame Daubreuil who tells us this tale. If it were, all would indeed be plain sailing. It is Madame Renauld. Is she, then, in league with the other?" "I can't believe that," I said slowly. "If she is, she must be the most consummate actress the world has ever known." "Ta, ta, ta. said Poirot impatiently. "Again you have the sentiment and not the logic. If it is necessary for a criminal to be a consummate actress, then by all means assume her to be one. But is it necessary? I do not believe Madame Renauld to be in league with Madame Daubreuil for several reasons, some of which I have already enumerated to you. The others are self-evident. Therefore, that possibility eliminated, we draw very near to the truth, which is, as always, very curious and interesting." "Poirot," I cried, "what more do you know?" "Mon ami, you must make your own deductions. You have access to the facts. Concentrate your grey cells. Reason, not like Giraud, but like Hercule Poirot." "But are you sure?" "My friend, in many ways I have been an imbecile, but at last I see clearly." "You know everything?" "I have discovered what Monsieur Renauld sent for me to discover." "And you know the murderer?" "I know one murderer." "What do you mean?" "We talk a little at cross purposes. There are here not one crime, but two. The first I have solved. The second, eh bien, I will confess, I am not sure." "But Poirot, I thought you said the man in the shed had died a natural death." "Ta, ta, ta." Poirot made his favourite ejaculation of impatience. "Still you do not understand. One may have a crime without a murderer, but for two crimes it is essential to have two bodies." His remark struck me as so peculiarly lacking in lucidity that I looked at him in some anxiety, but he appeared perfectly normal. Suddenly he rose and strolled to the window. "Here he is," he observed. "Who?" "Monsieur Jacques Renauld. I sent a note up to the villa to ask him to come here." Well, that changed the course of my ideas, and I asked Poirot if he knew that Jacques Renauld had been in Merlinville on the night of the crime. I had hoped to catch my astute little friend napping, but as usual he was omniscient. He, too, had inquired at the station. "And without doubt we are not original in the idea, Hastings. The excellent Giraud, he also has probably made his inquiries." "Well, you don't think—" I said, and then stopped. "Oh, no, it would be too horrible." Poirot looked inquiringly at me, but I said no more. It had just occurred to me that though there were 7 women, directly and indirectly connected with the case, Mrs. Renauld, Madame Daubreuil and her daughter, the mysterious visitor, and the 3 servants, there was, with the exception of old Auguste, who could hardly count, only one man, Jacques Renauld. And a man must have dug the grave. I had no time to develop further the appalling idea that had occurred to me, for Jacques Renauld was ushered into the room. Poirot greeted him in a businesslike manner. "Take a seat, monsieur. I regret infinitely to derange you, but you will perhaps understand that the atmosphere of the villa is not too congenial to me. Monsieur Giraud and I do not see eye to eye about everything. His politeness to me has not been striking, and you will comprehend that I do not intend any little discoveries I may make to benefit him in any way." "Exactly, Monsieur Poirot," said the lad. "That fellow Giraud is an ill-conditioned brute, and I'd be delighted to see someone score at his expense." "Then may I ask a little favour of you?" "Certainly." "I will ask you to go to the railway station and take a train to the next station along the line, Abelac. Ask at the cloakroom whether 2 foreigners deposited a valise there on the night of the murder. It is a small station, and they are almost certain to remember. Will you do this?" "Of course I will," said the boy, mystified, though ready for the task. "I and my friend, you comprehend, have business elsewhere," explained Poirot. "There is a train in a quarter of an hour, and I will ask you not to return to the villa, as I have no wish for Giraud to get an inkling of your errand." "Very well. I'll go straight to the station." He rose to his feet. Poirot's voice stopped him. "One moment, Monsieur Renauld. There is one little matter that puzzles me. Why did you not mention to Monsieur Autet this morning that you were in Merlinville on the night of the crime?" Jacques Renaud's face went crimson. With an effort he controlled himself. "You've made a mistake. I was in Cherbourg, as I told the examining magistrate this morning." Poirot looked at him. His eyes narrowed, cat-like, until they only showed a gleam of green. "Then it is a singular mistake that I have made there, for it is shared by the station staff. They say you arrived by the 11:40 train." For a moment Jacques Renaud hesitated. Then he made up his mind. "And if I did? I suppose you do not mean to accuse me of participating in my father's murder?" He asked the question haughtily, his head thrown back. "I should like an explanation of the reason that brought you here." "Well, that is simple enough. I came to see my fiancée, Mademoiselle Daubreuil." I was on the eve of a long voyage, uncertain as to when I should return. I wished to see her before I went, to assure her of my unchanging devotion." "And did you see her?" Poirot's eyes never left the other's face. There was an appreciable pause before Renauld replied. Then he said, "Yes." "And afterwards?" "I found I had missed the last train. I walked to Saint-Beauvais, where I knocked up a garage and got a car to take me back to Cherbourg." "Saint-Beauvais? That is 15 kilometers. A long walk, Monsieur Renauld." I felt like walking." Poirot bowed his head as a sign that he accepted the explanation. Jack Renauld took up his hat and cane and departed. In a trice, Poirot jumped to his feet. "Quick, Hastings, we will go after him." Keeping a discreet distance behind our quarry, we followed him through the streets of Merlinville. But when Poirot saw that he took the turning to the station, he checked himself. "All is well. He has taken the bait. He will go to Aberlac, and will inquire for the mythical valise left by the mythical foreigners. Yes, mon ami, all that was a little invention of my own." "You wanted him out of the way," I exclaimed. "Your penetration is amazing, Hastings. Now, if you please, we will go up to the Villa Geneviève."